probably see the screens now. If not,
Yep.
complain.
Yeah, yeah, we can.
Yeah. So thank you for talking to me about this issue of a research agenda for geopolitical tensions in human-computer interaction. So this is based on a paper I wrote with Jose Abdel and Professor Croce and Judith Billon and a colleague in South America, whom I also never have seen face to face. And I think this person I even not seen online. So we are a mixed group, and we gave this presentation also Jose and me in, by the way, in Uppsala University. So it goes around, which is just, and it's a very hot topic. I don't know in your university, but in my university, geopolitical things is one of the major things coming on the agenda in the coming years because of the Trump administration's policy and because of other things, the New World Order and so on. So it's a very hot topic. And I can say the main point of this talk is basically that we should, within HCI, we should of course keep developing universal knowledge all over the world for the benefit of the planet and humankind. But we should also pay more attention to our local issues, our local problems, and try to do some research in what is unique HCI problems for our region, our area of the world, because I believe there's a richness of topics in that approach which we should go forward with. Yeah. So HCI, just have to try to see if I can remove this thing up here. Yeah. HCI, the original idea with human-computer interaction as a field of practice and research was actually, it came out of, as many things comes out of the military conflicts. And the idea was to help, the First and Second World War. In particular, they used a lot of mechanical devices. So of course you got psychologists, anthropologists, and technical people, engineers and so on, in to help improve the military equipment. So the idea was to help, I guess, mostly people in Western democracies. But there is obviously a need for embedding HCI because today, digital technology is dominating everyday life all over the planet, more or less. So it's really important that we get this HCI into this context. And what we want to do with this paper is we want to do something more than just understanding the situation. We also want to come up with some, you could say, actionable insights or build it on an actionable framework. There are some, in our view, as some key geopolitical challenges in the research field of human-computer interaction. So not only practice field, but also research field. In the research field, there's actually a lack of a global shared HCI identity. I know that many of you, if you're interested in this field, will know about the American-based CHI community, which is absolutely dominating these years. 40 years ago, the European-based Interact HCI community from IFIP was equally big, but it's not like that anymore. Today, CHI is dominating. But there are multiple other HCI communities around the world. So there's this lack of a global shared HCI identity. What is it to be an HCI researcher? I could just mention that in India, for example, most of the HCI researchers are from a design background, while in China, they are both psychologists and engineers and so on, different. Yeah. A second thing is that the Western developed HCI methods like the think aloud usability evaluation is not sufficient for global diversity. So I did some research on that in Malaysia, where in Denmark it's fine to ask the user to give your thoughts as they are, but in Malaysia it wouldn't work because you have to be polite to your superior. In Denmark, we are very rude. So there's this power distance, which you need to take into account. Maybe things are changing. Yeah. And then the third one that is clearly, as I mentioned before briefly, that the identity is more than just an identity. It's also an kind of a power imbalance. So for example, CHI is mostly in the US. It's also going elsewhere a little bit. But in that sense, it's sponsored by American tech companies, and you could discuss that a long time. But we need to know more about these dynamics, about the international research organizations, because these might be very important for our academic freedom, etc., etc. So I could talk about that for a very long time. Now, what we did in this paper was we tried to, as I said before, we wanted to be able to do something. So we used this knowledge mobilization framework. I think it was Professor Kruse who suggested that. And we combined that with activity theory, which I guess I suggested something like that. And we wanted to analyze the kind of the power and politics and ideologies in HCI. Yeah. So how did we do that? So let me just briefly explain activity theory. So the idea in activity theory is, funny enough, that it's about human activities. It came from the old Soviet Union. It was an idea that the human mind and the human tool use, how you use tool, including digital tools, is decided by the societal activities. So if you are in a learning activity, everything you do will be kind of dominated by this learning motivation. If you are in a work situation, everything you do will be dominated by that. So, and this tool in particular, what I show on the screen, was from a PhD project from a Finnish researcher, Yrjö Engström, who became extremely famous in the 1990s and zeros. And the thing you need to know about this here is that these arrows, they signify tensions, contradictions, conflicts between the different elements in the activity triangle, which you are looking. It's an attempt to represent an human activity in a triangle. And you can see there are tools on the top. Subject, these are the humans. Object, these are what the humans want to do with the tools in order to get to the outcome. And Engström, he added there are also rules for how to do things in society. There's a community or more communities, like the community of workers or community of, I don't know, but different communities which are relevant to the actual activity. And then there's usually a division of labor. Some part of the community do that, some other part of the community do this, and so on. And then you can analyze the tension between those elements. It's useful for contextualized and politicized HCI analysis, we thought. Then there's a knowledge mobilization framework, and again, Professor Kruse will be the expert on that. But the key questions here is, of course, if you want to mobilize knowledge, whose knowledge would you mobilize, what knowledge, and how would you do that, and why would you do that? And we thought this was a great framework for connecting HCI practices and insights with the local needs. And this was developed by Ward. I don't know his research in depth, but there's a reference to Ward 2017 where I can read about this. So just briefly, I want to help. Who do I want to help? And these are the KP, you should see knowledge producers. There are PRA, the frontline practitioners. There's members of the public acting on behalf of communities. And then there are the decision makers, the DMs. These are the people we want to help. We want them to mobilize, to mobilize what? What is we want to mobilize? What kind of knowledge? Scientific, factual knowledge, like, I mean, it would be really nice if our political leaders would actually use some of the science knowledge which we produce. It could be great, but also technical knowledge in terms of practical knowledge, experience, and expertise in general. And not to forget practical wisdom. I mean, there's a lot of knowledge out there in everyday life, which is important. And how we would mobilize that knowledge? We will, of course, connect different stakeholders and actors by establishing relationships between these. And we will like to disseminate and synthesize knowledge through the standard dissemination channels. And of course, we would also like to facilitate interactive learning. So some kind of action between stakeholders is always a good idea. In order to do what? To why would we do that? So SO means we will want to develop the local solutions to practice-based problem. This is where I believe HCI is really important. I mean, if you have certain problems, I never forget this problem I got from a Mexican professor. He mentioned that in Mexico, some of his students developed a device that could identify very dangerous spider in the desert. and they only had that spider in Mexico. So it was a really local problem, but a very important practical problem. So that I thought that was an interesting example of that. It's also about developing new policies, programs, or recommendations based on HCI. This is actually very important, something we should do. We should tell the politicians what to do based on our knowledge. We're much better to that. And it's important to adopt, implement defined policies and practices, and to change practices and behaviors, and of course, to produce new useful knowledge. So that was Mort's a quick view of what's a knowledge mobilization framework. And as you saw before, I had this activity theory framework. And how do you combine two theories? Well, we did something very, very simple. We just made a table. So in the rows you have the tensions, and in the columns you have the knowledge mobilization categories. So it was and this lorem ipsum in the middle means something like you can add relevant text on that. So table 3 below is our kind of a combined framework for analysis. Then we had 3 cases, and it's a little bit embarrassing to tell a case about South Africa in South Africa because obviously I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'll try it anyway. And maybe it's more easy to talk about China or Colombia. I will try to give these cases. So the case in South Africa was about Ubuntu versus Western HCI curricula. So you have to read the paper, but here's the short version. So this activity triangle, we try to identify tensions which were important in this case based on data. And these are the green ones. And you can see on the right side, they are explained. For example, tension A, which is in the lower left half of the triangle, you can see there's an issue between the rules and the community. And that issue is that the biased Western values or rules and scientific paradigms, they do not very well fit with the marginalized users in South Africa, according to the case which we had. If you take tension B, it's on the top right on the triangle, you can see there's a tension between the tool and the object. And in this case, the tool is the Ubuntu and African metaphors and epistemologies, ways to understand things, and the object, which is to have HCI curriculum in your country. I don't know why we wrote Africa, but that's a very generalizing thing. But anyway, and you could go on with the C and the D and explain that. So that was yeah, maybe I should take C. So the problem here with C is that African HCI educators and graduates, they become alienated, I mean, removed and distant and different from the local communities because they are influenced by Western scientific paradigms. I can say it's a little bit the same in Denmark, while many Danish researchers are more American than Danish because they have to think like an American in order to publish in the best American journals. And then tension D, which you can see between the object and division of labor, where African HCI and education researchers do not select research topics on the reformation of curriculum for Africa. So there's a problem here that instead of being those in charge of the curriculum, it's some people placed in the UK or wherever they decide what the textbook should be about. So this was the analysis. These are the tensions in South Africa. Now the idea was for this paper that if you then go to China, you would see you can apply the same framework, but you will see slightly different tensions in China. So in China, for example, we had the tension A between the rules and the object, which is that the positivist cultural model design rules, they are based on observation of how it is in China, made by Western researchers. So Western researchers go to China, come back to Western countries, write something about how they do things in China, and then suggest design markers, cultural markers, and then it's supposed to create interface products which fits the local Chinese population. So that's a problem. And what is shown in the B very clearly that these rules do not fit the Chinese communities of users. And then C shows that there's an issue between the subjects, which are the Chinese brand designers, and the actual Chinese community of users, which is that the Chinese designers get alienated from Chinese users, again, due to the acceptance of cultural models created by Western researchers. And then there's a D, which is between the object and the division of labor, meaning that the Western HCI research creates design theories for the East, and this may lead to unsuitable interfaces. Obviously, it would be better if you had Chinese HCI researchers creating design theories for the Chinese market, you would think, right? And then, of course, E is a very interesting tension, the last one. It's between the subject and the tool. So the interesting thing is that Chinese designers do not want to use the Chinese design tool, so they prefer the Western design tools. So there are plenty of tensions in this case, which is quite an interesting case, to be honest. Yeah. And then we also did one in Colombia. And there are also lots of tensions. And it was quite interesting because it was made by our Colombian colleague, and it has different words than I'm used to in my business school approach. So here, tension A is between cyberpunk and autonomous narratives and autonomous design versus this kind of traditional roles as a professional HI researchers. So the point here is that, as far as I understand, is that in some or maybe all South American countries, they have a little bit of a revolutionary culture because of their cultural history of being occupied by the Spanish, which does not necessarily fit very well with these traditional roles as technical HI designers. Anyway, so in tension B, you see the problem with how these design tools, the cyberpunk design tools, goes against the user-centered design ideas. So user-centered, I guess the idea here is that user-centered design is it's a nice Western way of, if just we involve a few users, everything will be nice and smooth without conflicts. But this cyberpunk and autonomous design tools will actually show that it doesn't work like that in the Colombia at least. And the C tension is that designers do not share the same values. They are diverse bunch. And finally, D is that between the rules and the object is that colonial dichotomic values do not lead to non-binary design objects. It's a much more diverse situation. Yeah, I think you should read the paper to understand this case better. Anyway, the insights from these three case studies is that in South Africa, Ubuntu values are undervalued in the HCI curricula. In China, there's a complexity of perception and mismatch with Western models. It's actually very layered upon layered of misunderstandings or different understandings. And in Colombia, global HCI is actually appropriated for localized subversive design, kind of revolutionary design, which is also very interesting, maybe something to learn from. So that was the insight from the case studies. And this is then presented in the paper. You don't need to be afraid. I'm not going to, in a monotonous voice, go through all these elements, but basically you can see the cases on the left, and then you can see the mobilization categories in the next column. And if you want help to interpret, there's a little bit memory help out on the side what all these acronyms means. So you should be able to see in these columns how to mobilize these insights from the activity theory analysis. So to do something based on this, at least that's the idea. So what we try to do here is, of course, to encourage you guys to go and do similar studies. It could be really interesting, for example, to see a paper on comparing, do an analysis of the situation in Namibia and South Africa, for example, if they have the same HI problems or their differences. Anyway, so we suggest this research agenda components, the elements, if you want to do some papers like this. For example, you could think about what kind of governance system your country is running. Is it kind of deliberative? I think that's supposed to be in the Danish example. The idea here is we talk and talk and talk and talk until we agree about something. And the Marxist, I guess, is what you have in China, where you think more about that poor people should have a better situation. And then cosmopolitan, I guess this is more like the United Nations or something where you can have values across the world thinking about the whole planet. The next line is the research or element component is the research focus. And we suggest activity theory, which gives you these object, subject, tool, and methods to focus on. We think the value of HCI is an important component, whether it's multidimensional or bidimensional. Bidimensional, I would say, would be the user-centered versus not user-centered, but it could be much more complex. Motivations for HCI, is it intrinsic or eccentric? I mean, is there a real need for HCI for example, in Denmark? I would say we have had great success with digitalization of society. So so at least nowadays it's you just need to have a good user interfaces, otherwise you can't live your life. And then, of course, the HCI knowledge flows. So these can be global, regional, and local. As I mentioned before, it could be interesting to see the knowledge flows in the countries close to your country. And then, of course, the HCI maturity. For example, in Denmark, we had our first book on usability. It was in 1984, and a person like as old as me, that would be in my youth. So it's a very long time ago. But in other countries, I think HCI maturity is more recent. So that might mean something for society. I am about to end up with this picture of something from China, I guess. So the key findings are that the geopolitical tensions, the current conflict climate, you would probably see that this will also influence your HI practices. As a minimum, I can say it's already influenced where we publish. We might think more about publishing for here from Denmark in European context than before. So it clearly does change something. Western paradigms often dominate. Yes, for now they do, but this might be changing it very rapidly. This is very exciting, actually. To what degree? For example, I don't know, again, your situation, but in Europe, we are seeing many more Chinese cars coming in, and Chinese cars are having slightly different user interfaces compared to what we are used to, less minimalistic than the one we are used to. And then there's a need for pluralistic, localized, indigenous HI research. Jose and me have for long argued for this, maybe because Jose is from Venezuela and I'm from Denmark, which is a very tiny country nowadays. So we really see the benefit of indigenous coming from within HI research. Conclusion, from this study published in this paper, we strongly recommend to combine activity theory and knowledge mobilization framework to do some kind of geopolitical analysis, to learn in a systematic way about the differences for the HI in different regions or countries. And we think it's important to promote diversity and inclusion in HI, not only in the American way, but also in the way that you think it should be done, diversity and inclusion. And then research agenda, embracing regional knowledge and diversity. It will really be nice to see more. I can just tell you that right now we are doing a literature review of some CHI papers, and it's just amazing. Still, it's very common practice that people do not report what the participants, the language of the data collection or the country of the data collection. It's just assumed that this is English and going on in USA. Very strange. We need to start reporting these informations. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Torkil. It was very interesting. I'm going to let the first question go to Fazlin because you had your hand up.
Actually, that was just a clap.
No, your hand is up. I saw I saw the hand up. And thus you're responsible for at least one question.
I think this is more of a comment. Thank you for a great talk. Can you possibly expand on how we could be more inclusive of Ubuntu within a South African context, so to speak? Because we predominantly still use Western architectures and frameworks. How do we flip? How do we flip the switch?
Yeah.
Do you have recommendations for that?
Yeah, I have two recommendations right now off the top of my mind. The first is that read Professor Kroes's paper on Ubuntu in Scandinavian Journal of Information Systems. I think we should do that. That would be the first recommendation. But more generally, your question is, of course, about how do we claim the local philosophical and knowledge production tradition. How do we claim that more into our HCI research? So in your case, it would be Ubuntu. If you go to Malaysia, it will be something different. If you go to Greenland, which is very popular right now in the media, it will be something different. For example, Greenland, I can talk about that instead of Ubuntu. I can say that in Greenland is part of a commonwealth with Denmark, so to speak. So, but there's a lot of interesting differences because it's a small community, Greenland, small country with an Inuit culture more than the majority Danish, but still they are very closely connected to Denmark. So how would you create HCI knowledge, which is more closely built on the mythology of Greenland? They have a lot of stories about different beings living in the Greenland Arctic environment. And they also have a very different technology. They go fishing in the Arctic waters. They do mining in the fields of the Greenland, so on. Things we don't do in Denmark. So there's a great opportunity, which I really wanted to explore if I had another life, to build a Greenlandish HCI research approach, which might be general for the Arctic area. So built on and including some of the Greenlandish way of thinking about how to share knowledge, for example. I think it's more community-based, but it's more than that. I don't know if that was an answer, but that's what I could come up with right now.
I think that was an answer, seeing as that Fazlin has not responded.
Yes, thank you. Because I think that also we just give we think that West is better a lot of the times. And even though we subconsciously marked West is better, even if you're sitting there as an academic. And I think maybe what we need to do at grassroots level is actually value what it is that we have and how we build knowledge from our own sources and our own people.
Can I have
I just want to add to that. I completely agree, and I think that what Professor Kroese did in this paper he just cited for you or shared with you. I'm not saying that this is the only wonderful thing to do, but it's clear that it would be very nice to see small papers from you disseminating whatever knowledge what you have. Whatever it is that you have, it doesn't need to be the top of the world or the best. For example, in Scandinavia, we have for many years trying to promote this idea of democratic system development. Like we are saying, it's Scandinavian tradition of democratic system development. Actually, it's a little bit bullshit, but it means that you involve some people in developing systems, and it's a good idea. So why not try to disseminate that? So if you can do something similar from your basis, that would be great. I would love to read those papers. Thank you.
Jan?
Yes, thank you. Just switching on my mic and my camera. Can you hear me now, Ted?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, great. Torkil, thank you very much. I think you did a great job by condensing a very long article in a very abbreviated way that's easy to understand. So thank you very much for that. I recently attended a conference on the use of IT in education, and I read a paper there in which I also talked about the differences between Western ethics and Ubuntu ethics. And one of the people in the audience asked a very relevant question that I didn't think of a lot before. He said, yes, it's true what you said in your paper that there's not one culture in Africa, there are many cultures, but the same is true of the West. There's not only one Western culture, there are many. And you actually referred to the difference between American and Danish cultures. So I think we should also acknowledge the cultural differences within Europe and North America. Thank you.
To further that a little bit, seeing as that I've lived in a bunch of Nordic countries and South Africa, there's considerable different social developments and social structures and philosophies for each of these countries. And I find it quite seriously disingenuous to label it as one philosophy, specifically grouping social democracies like the Nordics with America. It's almost counterintuitive and it's lazy, very lazy, because if you're going to start acknowledging individual philosophies from individual countries, then you have to do it for all of them. So the construct of Western is just lazy, in my opinion, but that's just the way I feel about it, because I've struggled with it for a very long time. It even irritates me, and I'm like, because if you move even from like Sweden to Finland, although there's similarities, there's huge differences too, enormous. And then they're like, it's everything is Western, and I'm just like, that's just lazy.
I agree. Sorry, if I can say something, I agree on that. You know, my daughter, she studied philosophy, so that they learn about American or Anglo-Saxon philosophy and continental philosophy. So at least there's a difference there between American philosophy and continental philosophy. But then there's also now they have started in philosophy to call this kind of Western philosophical thing. They call it a regional philosophy because they now embraced also the Chinese philosophy and other kind of regional philosophies. So it's all very. So I agree with Professor Krause. This is a great observation, and it actually also goes on in. If you look at European HCI, it's really hard to identify. I guess you also know this situation from the African continent, that countries in Europe, it really differs in terms of how many HCI researchers they have and how active they are in this area of research. Actually, we don't even call it HCI research in Europe, many of us. We call it something else, media something. But at least if you want to find HCI researchers, for example, in the Eastern European countries, and in particular with a social science background, like right now I'm looking for psychology researchers with a European background who want to write for my special issue on European psychology of HCI. And it's really, really hard to find anyone who are interested in doing that, in particular from the Eastern European countries who actually does research in psychology and technology. So I think this is a great point. If you know anyone in Europe who does HCI research from a psychological background, please tell me about that. I would be very happy for knowing about that.
Does anybody else have questions? Jan, your hand's still up. Are you asking more questions?
Yeah, I'm posting so many links here that I forgot to take my hand down. Sorry
No,
about
that's okay. I'm just like, just in case you want more questions.
No.
Duffy or JJ? Duffy is a PhD student at Tunbridge University who's working in the game lab. Duffy?
I actually had a question and then I forgot it again.
No!
But I think you're well, my question was sort of addressed by the same issue that you raised about like generalizing, versus sort of making, very specific groupings of like, our philosophies and so on, and then generalizing to everyone else, which I think is a valid criticism no matter where you are. Yeah, I'll try and think of what I was going to ask.
Okay, I can just comment on what you just said. I know that, for example, I know from the field of psychology that they tried several times to identify what they call indigenous knowledge. For example, they tried to, there's something called the Big Five theory of personalities. And in China, they tried to find a sixth dimension, which they thought had something to do with time. And it's really hard because there are maybe something universal knowledge. It is possible to formulate some general knowledge. For example, in HCI, we think that the idea of that the users should have feedback, and some design principles probably are true wherever you go in the world, more or less. It would be really weird if action shouldn't have feedback. But the point is that there are also at the same time local knowledge. So the tension between those two, I guess, is really interesting. So to a degree that for example, I'm quite sure I could learn something from studies of HCI in from local studies of HCI in South Africa, if there could be something with Ubuntu. I mean, we already learned from that the idea that community usability might be different from individual usability, which I think is quite useful for many groups, also like the elderly or the children or whatever. I mean, the whole idea is just quite interesting. Yeah. I know I'm
what I just heard was that Jan has to organize a sabbatical to South Africa for you. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Seeing as he's an emeritus professor and the right connections, he can hook this up. That's what I heard. Just putting it out there.
Yeah. You get Jan
Jan's
thinking
not
about
laughing.
that. Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
JJ.
Hey, apologies for my camera. I'm on my work computer. I'm industry, so unfortunately I can't take this hour off. I'm packaging screens while listening. I think what comes to mind here, Professor, wants just very much an enjoyable talk, and the privilege of being a small part of Professor Cruz's research. On a practical level, how to overcome the resistance. I don't know if it's quite such a big thing in Europe and America, but indigenous versus Western paradigms, there's quite a big resistance in South Africa to overcome there with many of the academics. I don't know if Ted can maybe also talk to that, if that's unique to us or not.
Are you talking about like resistance to academia or just the research?
Resistance to looking past Western paradigms towards indigenous ways of thinking and engaging with HCI and the strengths of that.
I mean, I think globally, politicians don't understand anything that's not on Twitter. No one heard that.
But you could argue that. I'm not sure I understood you correctly, but I just give my interpretation. So the situation is that if you are a scientist, because you believe in universal values, which are true all over the world. That's kind of why you want to do this. You want to create new, true universal knowledge to the benefit of humankind and maybe the planet as a whole, and maybe other planets, whatever. Yeah. So that's what you want to do. So therefore, there's a little bit of it just feels wrong if you go too local. If you are saying this is only valid for this single case, like you do in qualitative research, or I always tell my students that if they say we cannot generalize for this because it's a single case study, or I just interview a few people, I said bullshit. You have to generalize. That's your task of as a researcher. So you need to be able to generalize. So, so there's some resistance on that basis, but there's also resistance, I guess, based on other things like the values in your country, like Faslin mentioned before, that we all think that the American way of doing research is the best. So we all want American research, like we want American technology in general, and so on. And it's really hard to get out of that value set, because if you go to US, you will also get more salary. So who wouldn't want to become a professor in US? So there's a lot of things going on in research which is not talked so much about, and which might be more. So here you could say that if you could support your local HCI or research organizations, if they have an international research community, for example, around Africa or something like that, if that is worth supporting, that could be a structure which would contain or be or support that kind of thinking. If they are not doing that, you have to build some other structure. But I guess some local regional structure would, like we have in NordiCHI in Nordic countries. Sometimes we discuss what is Nordic about NordiCHI. And it's a good discussion. We don't have any answers, but it's a good discussion to have now and then. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor.
More questions?
Yeah, you were talking about generalizable, but don't you rather mean transferable? Because in South Africa, the sections of our population are very different. And to be able to generalize across population groups is very difficult. You could study certain populations and say, because other populations are similar, that your findings may be transferable. But I don't know you could accurately say it's generalizable.
That's a very good point and very precise point, Faslin. Actually, better than I would be able to do. I would normally, if it is a qualitative research finding, I would use the word transferable, because I wouldn't, as you are alluding to, I wouldn't argue that what I have studied is just the same in different contexts. I would think that the context would be different, but it's transferable in the sense that it can be interpreted into the new context in a sense, but it probably needs to be contextualized into the new context where it's supposed to be used. Generalizable, yeah, and maybe sometimes it's also it can be generalizable if if you do some findings based on Ubuntu, which has something to do about something with community, how communities are organized around the use of technology. Maybe there's something there which is valid for all communities of a certain size all over the world. I don't know. Maybe then you could say it be generalized. So I would leave the options open for either this could be transferable or generalizable in specific research projects. That would be my approach. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody more questions? Okay.
Sure. Oh, wait, sorry. I kind of remembered what I wanted to ask. So, I think there's an interesting tension in what you mentioned between, localizing versus sort of globalizing, if you can put those two as like antipoles, because obviously a lot of the tech we use, I mean, most of the tech we use is not made in South Africa, and that includes, software and things. Some of it is, but most of it's not. And there is a lot of sort of having to fall in line with that, if you're working in tech and so on. So having to adhere to the way that things are done implicitly and so on. So there, at least for us, there is definitely a reason why we would want, let's say, our graduates to kind of fall in line with how things are done with regards to the way that, people design things and approach things and so on, so that they can also, make their ideas work there and so on. But then, I have also experienced in my very brief stint as a web developer that people kind of steer the other way and say, no, we're actually going to design this in this way because the audience is actually more of a very specific South African demographics, and our market research has shown that they actually want their things to look this way, which is quite different from, the trends of how certain apps and so on for the more global market would look like. So I think, there is this tension in that, and it's something that's very hard to address. So yeah, not really a question. It's more like something, a thought that I had that you might have some ideas on.
Yeah, that's a great thought. I mean, I just also, I'm not going to answer anything because you didn't ask, but it's my impression that number one, that if you look at the industry, I mean, for example, car producers, they actually localize a lot. So they localize their products all over the world to different markets, and they have certain models on those certain markets and so on. So the question is, it might be very superficial what they're doing, but some of it might also be more deep. So the question for HCI, I would say, is how deep should we go? Now, I think that is connected to another thing, which is one of my pet ideas. I think the Apple Macintosh is like having a Burger King product. So it's a very easy digestible, made for comfort and pleasure in a very narrow sense. So I think this is not a good way to develop design technology. I think we should design technology which is much more complex and varied and diverse and much more authentic, challenging, and makes our lives richer instead of making them simpler. And the last thing I want to push out here is that I'm also a little bit against standards, because I think standards, I mean, why should standards necessarily help to make the things more usable? Okay, in some situations, standards are very good, like safety critical things and so on. Of course they are, but I think we should be careful not necessarily always to push standards for technology development ahead of us. Anyway, that was some random unconnected thoughts. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to say thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. I hope we've all learned lots of things.